My hands were already holding the apron. Thick cotton. Still warm from whoever wore it last. The fabric had that particular stiffness that comes from industrial washing. Starched, sanitized, stripped of anything personal. Before you read any further, take a second and ask yourself this. If this were you, would you have corrected him immediately? Or stayed quiet? A voice said. Kitchens left. I hadn't even looked up yet. The marble beneath my feet was cold even through my shoes. Real marble. Carrara, probably. The kind with veins that look like smoke trapped in ice. It caught the light from the chandelier above, something massive and European, dripping crystal like frozen rain. The foyer smelled expensive. Bergamot. Fresh roses in a vase I couldn't see. And underneath it all, leather and old wood. The smell of money that's been money for generations. If you've ever been underestimated in a room like this, or dismissed before you spoke, drop a comment and say, I see it. I read every one. But the man standing 3 feet away wasn't looking at any of that. He was looking at his phone. Kitchens left, he said again. Louder. As if volume would translate better than words. I looked down at the apron in my hands. Black. Pressed. The kind servers wear at restaurants where the bill arrives in a leather folder and no prices are printed on the menu. Then I looked at him. And this is where everything changes, because what I decided to do next would determine whether this ended in humiliation or something far more permanent. Stay with me. Mid-40s. Suit that fit the way suits fit when they're made for your body specifically. Hair going silver at the temples in that way that reads as distinguished on men and old on women. Wedding ring. Simple band, which meant old money. New money needs diamonds. His eyes hadn't reached my face yet. They'd done what eyes like his always do. Registered female, registered brown skin, registered the yoga pants and t-shirt I'd worn for the red-eye flight, and made a decision. His hand gestured vaguely toward the hallway. Still not looking up from his phone. They're already behind schedule. Guests arrive in 20 minutes. You can leave your bag in the mudroom. Not a question. Not a request. A command. I felt my jaw tighten. Felt my shoulders pull back. Felt the words rising. I think there's been a mistake. I'm not. And then I stopped. Because I knew this house. I knew the marble beneath my feet was laid in 1987. I knew the chandelier was a replacement for the original, which had fallen during a hurricane when I was 9. I knew that if I walked down the hallway he just gestured toward, past the powder room with the hand-painted Italian tile, through the butler's pantry with the glass cabinets, I'd find the kitchen where I'd learned to make my grandmother's peach cobbler. I knew this house. As of 11 days ago, I owned this house. The man was already walking away. Expensive shoes clicking against expensive stone. He called back over his shoulder. And remember, smile, don't speak unless spoken to, and absolutely do not spill anything on anyone. These people are important. These people are important. I looked down at the apron again. 2 options. Option 1. Call him back. Correct the mistake. Watch his face cycle through confusion, then recognition, then horror, then that particular kind of panic that comes from realizing you've been catastrophically rude to someone who could ruin you. Watch him apologize in that over-sincere way that isn't really an apology. It's a plea for mercy dressed up as contrition. Option 2. Don't. Option 2. See how far this goes. Option 2. Walk into that kitchen, tie on this apron, and serve champagne to every single person who'd ignored my emails, dodged my lawyer's calls, contested my inheritance, and made quiet bets about whether I'd actually have the spine to claim what was mine. Option 2. Become invisible. And watch what people do when they think no one important is watching. I looked at the apron one more time. Then I tied it around my waist. The kitchen was exactly where he'd said it would be. Left hallway, past the powder room, through the butler's pantry. Chaos. 3 caterers moved in synchronized panic. One at the stove, one plating hors d'oeuvres, one arranging garnishes with the focused intensity of someone diffusing a bomb. A woman with a clipboard stood in the center of it, all like a conductor before an orchestra that had forgotten the music. "Finally," she said when she saw me. Not hello. Not who are you. Just finally, like I was late for a shift I'd never agreed to work. She didn't wait for a response. "You're on champagne. Veuve cliquot. Flutes are already out. Smile, circulate. Don't talk unless someone asks you a direct question. And for God's sake," she thrust a tray into my hands, "don't spill anything on anyone." The tray was heavy. Silver. The kind that costs more than a month's rent. Crystal flutes arranged in perfect rows, each one filled precisely to the same level. Champagne bubbles rose in tiny, hypnotic columns. I looked at my reflection in the polished side of the Sub-Zero refrigerator. Apron. Tray. Hair pulled back in the messy bun I'd twisted it into somewhere over Ohio. I looked like the help. Perfect. Well. Clipboard woman was staring at me. "What are you waiting for?" "They're arriving." I could hear them now. Voices in the foyer. Laughter. The particular kind of laughter that comes from people who've never had to worry about being heard. I picked up the tray, turned toward the door, and smiled. Not the smile I'd use in court. Not the smile I'd use at a faculty meeting. Not even the smile I'd use when meeting someone's parents for the first time. This was the smile I'd learned a long time ago. The one that makes you disappear. The one that says I'm here to serve you, and I'm grateful for the opportunity. The one that makes people forget you're a person. I walked through the doorway, tray balanced perfectly, and entered the party. My party. In my house. And not a single person looked at my face. This was going to be interesting. The first guest took a glass without looking at me. Just reached out, hand moving on autopilot, and lifted the champagne from the tray. The way you'd take a napkin from a dispenser. Transactional. Mechanical. His eyes never left the woman he was talking to. I moved to the next cluster of people. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Probably my lawyer. Probably wondering where I was. We'd planned this differently. I was supposed to arrive, introduce myself to the property manager, do a formal walkthrough, sign some papers. Clean. Professional. Announced. My fingers brushed the edge of my phone. Then moved higher. Found the lanyard in my other pocket. Credentials. Bar card. Judicial ID. The little leather folder that gets you past security at courthouses, that makes TSA agents straighten their posture, that changes the temperature of a room when you set it on a table. One flip of that wallet and this whole thing ends. I'm Judge Vance. I believe there's been a misunderstanding. 4 seconds of talk. Maybe 5. Then the apologies. The scrambling. The performance of remorse. The man from the foyer would materialize, face pale, already calculating how to spin this to minimize damage. Clipboard woman would appear, suddenly obsequious. Everyone would recalibrate. And I would never know. I would never know what they say when they think I can't hear them. My fingers stopped on the lanyard. I pulled my hand out of my pocket. Empty. Another guest approached. Woman this time. 60s. Diamonds at her throat that could fund a public defender's office for a year. She took a glass, then paused. Looked at me. Actually looked. My breath caught. "Is this the Veuve cliquot?" she asked. Not who are you. Not do I know you. Just a question about the champagne. "Yes, ma'am," I said. Voice pitched slightly higher than my natural register. Softer. The voice I'd used waiting tables in law school. The voice designed to earn tips and avoid trouble. She took a sip. "Tell them to chill it more next time. This is barely cold." "Yes, ma'am. I'll let them know." She'd already turned away. I stood there, tray in hand, and felt something shift inside my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Something colder than anger. More patient. I walked back toward the kitchen. Set the empty tray down. Picked up a full one. And instead of pulling out my credentials, instead of ending this, I folded the apron at the waist, smoothed it flat, tied it tighter. The third time through the room, I started recognizing faces. The man from the foyer, his name tag said Sterling Hartwell, VP Acquisitions, was holding court near the fireplace. The woman who'd complained about the champagne temperature was laughing at something he'd said. 3 others had formed a loose semicircle around them. Important people, apparently. These people are important. I wove through the crowd, offering champagne, collecting empty glasses. A few guests said thank you. Most didn't. One man handed me his empty glass and immediately took a full one from the same hand, as if I were a machine designed specifically for glass exchange. I should have felt angry. I should have felt insulted. Instead, I felt curious. What would Sterling say if he knew? What would Diamond Woman say if she knew the help she just dismissed was the person who now owned the marble she was standing on? What would any of them say if they knew I wasn't just some woman from a catering company? I was the judge who'd ruled on cases involving 3 people in this room, who'd sent one of their colleagues to prison, who'd been profiled in the Times last year as one of the youngest federal appointees in a decade. What would they say? But more interesting than that, what would they say if they didn't know? I caught my reflection in one of the tall windows overlooking the garden. Apron. Tray. Invisible. My grandmother used to tell me stories about working in houses like this. Before law school. Before she'd clawed her way into a courtroom and then onto a bench. She'd cleaned homes in this neighborhood. Served at parties exactly like this one. They tell you everything when they think you're nobody, she used to say. And you remember it all. I'd thought she was being metaphorical. But here now, in this room, I understood. Sterling was talking louder now. Had shifted from conversation to performance. His voice carried. Property values in this neighborhood are resilient because we control who gets in. That's the key. Control. The group around him nodded. Laughed. Someone made a joke I couldn't quite hear. I moved closer. Refilling glasses. Becoming part of the furniture. Sterling didn't even glance at me. The previous owner understood that, he continued. That's why she set up the trust the way she did. She knew the family would keep it appropriate. The previous owner. My grandmother. I kept my face neutral. Kept moving. Kept the tray level. Of course, now there's this whole mess with the granddaughter. He said it like granddaughter was a diagnosis. Some judge from out of state who thinks she can just waltz in and claim everything. As if bloodline means anything without. He caught himself. Smiled. Finished his champagne. Held out the empty glass. Didn't look at who took it. I took it. Set it on my tray. Handed him a fresh one. Thank you, he said. To the glass. To the air. Not to me. I could have corrected him right then. One sentence. I'm the granddaughter you're talking about. But I didn't. Because I was learning something valuable. I was learning exactly who these people were when they thought no consequences were watching. And I was learning that my silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. By the time I returned to the kitchen for the 4th tray, I'd made my decision. Not consciously. Not with a clear moment of choice. But somewhere between the foyer and the fireplace, between the first dismissal and the 50th, between the moment I touched my credentials and the moment I tied my apron tighter, the decision had made itself. I wasn't going to correct them. Not yet. Not until I knew everything. Clipboard woman barely looked at me as I set down the empty tray. You're doing fine. Keep circulating. And remember. Smile, don't talk, don't spill. I finished. Exactly. I picked up a fresh tray. Checked my reflection one more time. The judge was gone. Someone else stood in her place. Someone patient. Someone invisible. Someone who was about to learn every secret in this room. I pushed through the door and disappeared back into the crowd. And this time, I wasn't uncomfortable. I was hunting. 3. Antagonist introduced by voice. Curiosity hook. Who is this man, and how far does his cruelty go? Payoff promise. His own words will eventually destroy him. Beat 1. The laugh. I heard it before I saw him. That laugh. Not the polite laugh people use at networking events. Not the restrained chuckle of someone aware they're being watched. This was the laugh of a man who believed he was among friends. Unguarded. Full-throated. The kind of laugh that takes up space because it's never been asked to make room for anyone else. I turned toward the sound. Sterling Hartwell had moved from the fireplace to the bay windows overlooking the garden. The group around him had grown. 7 people now, all holding champagne, all leaning in slightly. The physics of social power. Orbits around a sun. I approached with my tray. And I told him, standards matter. Sterling was saying, you can't just let anyone in. Property values. Community character. These things don't maintain themselves. That laugh again. The group laughed with him. Smaller laughs. Permission laughs. I stopped at the edge of the circle. Stood there with my tray. Waited to be noticed. No one noticed. The problem, Sterling continued, is that people today think rules are suggestions. They think because they technically qualify on paper, they deserve access. But that's not how the world actually works. A woman in a red dress, Patricia something, her name tag said, nodded vigorously. Exactly. There's qualified. And then there's appropriate. Precisely. Sterling's hand cut through the air, champagne sloshing slightly. He didn't notice. And the previous owner, God rest her, she understood that. She built something here. A legacy. A standard. And now. He paused. Took a drink. The group waited. Now we have to deal with the consequences of her sentimentality. Sentimentality. My grandmother's decision to leave me her house was sentimentality. I kept my face blank. Kept the tray steady. Sterling still hadn't looked at me. The granddaughter is a judge, apparently. Patricia said it like judge was a punchline. So I've heard. Sterling's tone was dry. Amused. Federal bench. Very impressive. On paper. On paper, someone else echoed. But here's the thing about judges. Sterling was warming up now, playing to his audience. They live in theory. They deal with laws and precedents and constitutional abstracts. They don't understand how things actually work. How communities function. How value is maintained. He gestured with his glass again. Expansive. Confident. She probably thinks she can just show up, sign some papers, and become part of this neighborhood. As if proximity equals belonging. The laugh again. That same laugh. And suddenly I was 17. Standing in a courtroom. Watching my grandmother, fresh on the bench, the first black woman appointed in the district, listen to a defense attorney question her qualifications. Her temperament. Her ability to be impartial. She'd sat there. Silent. Patient. And then she'd ruled. And her ruling was so airtight, so perfectly reasoned, so unassailably correct that the attorney's client fired him the next day. Standards matter, she told me later. And so does knowing when to speak and when to listen. I stood there, invisible, and listened. Has anyone actually met her? Patricia asked. I spoke with her lawyer. Sterling said lawyer the way other people say pest control. Very insistent. Very assertive. I'm sure. Kept going on about proper documentation and legal rights and, he waved his hand dismissively. All the technical nonsense that doesn't actually matter when you're dealing with a community like this. A man I didn't recognize, early 60s, face like a hawk, leaned in. The trust was ironclad though. I saw the documents myself. She inherits everything. Technically, yes. Sterling's smile didn't reach his eyes. But there are ways to make people understand they're not welcome, not comfortable. Strategies to help them realize that maybe this isn't the right fit for them. What kind of strategies? Patricia's voice dropped. Conspiratorial. Sterling glanced around. Still didn't see me. I was 2 feet away, holding a tray of champagne. In his direct line of sight. Invisible. Well, he said, property taxes can be quite burdensome for someone on a judge's salary. Especially with the reassessment coming up. And then there's the neighborhood association fees. Those can be adjusted. Maintenance requirements can be quite specific. Expensive to maintain to code. Patricia's smile was sharp. Death by 1,000 paper cuts. I prefer to think of it as natural selection. Sterling raised his glass. The weak sell. The strong stay. That's how you maintain standards. The group laughed. That laugh. The same laugh I'd heard from the man who'd handed me the apron. The same dismissal. The same casual cruelty. And I understood something in that moment. This wasn't personal. This wasn't even about me specifically. This was what Sterling did. Who Sterling was. How Sterling moved through the world. With the absolute confidence that he would never face consequences. Because people like him never did. Empty. I blinked. Sterling was holding out his glass. Finally looking at me. Not at my face. At my hands. At the tray. Yes, sir. I took his empty glass. Offered him a fresh one. Thank you. Automatic. Meaningless. He turned back to his audience without pausing his monologue. The key is patience. You don't confront directly. You just make it clear, through various channels, that they don't belong. Eventually, they get the message. I should have walked away. Should have moved to the next cluster of guests. Instead, I stood there. 1 beat too long. Listening. What if she doesn't take the hint? Patricia asked. Sterling's smile widened. Everyone has pressure points. Financial. Professional. Personal. You just have to be creative about applying leverage. Isn't she a federal judge? The hawk-faced man sounded uncertain. Doesn't that come with certain protections? Protections. Sterling laughed. Tom, please. I've dealt with judges before. They're not gods. They're bureaucrats in robes. And bureaucrats can be managed. My grip on the tray tightened. Just last year, Sterling continued, there was a situation in Connecticut. Judge got appointed to a federal bench. Young. Diverse. Very celebrated appointment. Lots of press. I knew this story. I knew where this story was going. Within 6 months, she resigned. Cited personal reasons. But between you and me, he leaned in. The group leaned with him. Certain information about her past became public. Nothing illegal. Just unfortunate. The kind of thing that makes people question judgment. You're saying, Patricia's eyes gleamed, you found something? I'm saying that everyone has a past. And sometimes, the past becomes relevant to the present. Especially when it concerns questions of character. The group absorbed this. Nodded. Understood. I understood too. This wasn't just about making me uncomfortable. Sterling was planning to destroy me. And he was explaining exactly how he was going to do it. To a room full of witnesses. While I stood there. Invisible. Taking notes. I moved away from the circle. Circulated through the rest of the room. Smiled. Served. Stayed silent. But my mind was recording everything. Standards matter. Death by 1,000 paper cuts. Everyone has pressure points. Certain information about her past became public. Every word. Every laugh. Every casual admission of conspiracy. Sterling thought he was safe. He thought he was among friends. He thought the woman holding the champagne tray was nobody. And that's exactly what made him dangerous. Not his cruelty. Cruelty is common. Not his arrogance. Arrogance is everywhere. What made Sterling dangerous was his absolute certainty that he could say anything, do anything, plan anything, and never face consequences. Because people like him never did. The powerful protected each other. The invisible stayed invisible. The system worked exactly the way it was designed to work. Except Sterling had made one critical miscalculation. He'd assumed that power only exists in the visible. He'd assumed that silence means consent. He'd assumed that the woman serving champagne couldn't hurt him. I set down my empty tray, picked up a full one, and walked back into the room, past Sterling's group, close enough to hear. And if the granddaughter actually shows up to take possession, we'll make sure she understands what she's walking into. Politely, of course, but firmly. That laugh again. I smiled my server's smile, and committed every word to memory. His own voice was going to destroy him. He just didn't know it yet. I was 3 steps from the kitchen door when it hit me. The weight of what I was doing. The absurdity of it. The risk. I stopped. Stood there in the hallway between the party and the kitchen, tray balanced on one hand, and felt the full force of how easy it would be to end this. Honestly, one sentence would have done it. I'm Judge Vance. 4 words. Maybe 5 seconds of disruption. Then the dominoes fall. Sterling's face goes white. Patricia chokes on her champagne. The room goes silent in that particular way rooms go silent when someone realizes they've been catastrophically wrong about something important. Apologies would follow. Performative ones, at first. Shocked, scrambling, desperate to reframe what just happened. Then the real ones, quieter, in corners, accompanied by explanations about misunderstandings and assumptions and how anyone could have made the same mistake. The property manager would materialize from wherever he'd been hiding. My lawyer would arrive, briefcase in hand, documents ready. We'd do the walkthrough. I'd sign the papers. The house would officially become mine in every visible way, not just on paper. Clean. Professional. Correct. I stood there and felt how much easier that would be. Through the doorway, I could hear Sterling's voice. Still holding court. Still performing. Still assuming safety. The neighborhood association has bylaws about exterior modifications. Very specific. And if someone were to, say, fall behind on compliance. More laughter. I looked down at the apron tied around my waist. My phone buzzed. I pulled it out. Marcus Chin, SQ. Where are you? Property manager says you haven't arrived yet. Getting concerned. My lawyer. Punctual. Thorough. Probably standing in his car outside right now, checking his watch, wondering if I'd changed my mind about the whole thing. I could text him back. Tell him I'm here. Tell him to come in. Tell him to bring the documents and we'd handle this properly. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. One text would end it. Instead, I typed. Delayed. Start without me. Will call in 30. Hit send. Put the phone away. My grandmother had a story she used to tell. Not often. Only when it mattered. About her first year on the bench. About a case involving a real estate developer. Powerful man, connected family, the kind of defendant who walks into court like he's walking into his country club. She'd asked a question during the hearing. Simple procedural question. The developer's attorney had answered it. But the developer himself had leaned over to his lawyer, not even bothering to lower his voice, and said, "Does she even understand what we're talking about?" The whole courtroom heard it. My grandmother had paused, pen still in hand. Everyone waiting to see what she'd do. She'd smiled, and continued like nothing had happened. I didn't correct him, she told me years later. I let him think I was confused. Let him think I didn't understand the complexity of his arguments. Let him get comfortable. Why? I'd asked. I was in college then. Thought I understood the world. Because comfortable men make mistakes, she'd said. They over-explain. They contradict themselves. They admit things they shouldn't admit. And then, when you rule against them, when you show them that you understood everything all along, they have no defense. Their own words become the evidence. I'd thought it was a good story. I hadn't understood it was a strategy. I walked back into the kitchen, set down my empty tray. Clipboard woman, I'd learned her name was Diana, was plating something that looked like it cost more than my first car. "You're doing good," she said without looking up. "Keep it up. They like you. They like you." Because I was smiling. Because I was quiet. Because I was exactly what they expected me to be. Diana gestured to a fresh tray. "Take this round. Then we'll switch you to hors d'oeuvres." I picked up the tray, looked at my reflection in the polished refrigerator again. The judge was still gone. But the woman looking back at me wasn't weak. She wasn't defeated. She was choosing this. Actively. Strategically. Because every minute I stayed silent, Sterling revealed more. Every minute I stayed invisible, the guests around him relaxed further. Every minute I held this tray instead of my credentials, I gained access to information I could never get in a courtroom. Confrontation has power. Everyone knows that. But silence has power too. A different kind. The kind that makes people forget you're listening. I pushed back through the door. The party had grown louder. More champagne. More laughter. More looseness. Sterling was near the windows now, gesturing broadly. His inner circle had expanded, 9 people now, all leaning in, all invested in whatever he was saying. I approached from the side. No one looked at me. "The key is documentation," Sterling was explaining. "You create a paper trail of violations. Noise complaints. Parking issues. HOA infractions. Individually, they're nothing. But collectively," he smiled. "Collectively, they become a pattern. And patterns suggest character. Or lack thereof." Patricia nodded. "And if she fights it, then she looks litigious. Difficult. Not a team player." Sterling took a fresh glass from my tray without breaking eye contact with his audience. "And suddenly, she's exactly what we said she was all along. Someone who doesn't fit in. Someone who can't adapt to community standards." I moved to the next person. Collected an empty glass. Stayed in orbit. "How long do you think it would take?" someone asked. Sterling considered. 6 months. Maybe a year. Depends on how stubborn she is. But eventually, the pressure becomes untenable. The property becomes a burden instead of an asset. And when she sells. He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Everyone understood. When I sold, Sterling would make sure it went to the right buyer. Someone appropriate. Someone who fit the standard. Someone who wasn't me. I stood there, tray in hand, and felt the last possibility of doubt evaporate. This was the right choice. I could have corrected them at the door. Could have corrected them when Diamond Woman complained about the champagne temperature. Could have corrected them when Sterling said my grandmother was sentimental. Could have corrected them when he started plotting my systematic harassment. Could have corrected them 30 seconds ago when he outlined exactly how he planned to force me out. One sentence, at any point, would have ended it. But I didn't say that sentence. Because I was gaining something more valuable than dignity. I was gaining truth. Unfiltered. Unguarded. Undeniable. In a courtroom, people are careful. They know they're being recorded. They know their words matter. They curate. They calculate. They lie. But here, in my house, at a party they thought was theirs, with champagne and confidence and the absolute certainty of safety, they told the truth. And I was recording every word. Not on my phone. That would be illegal, probably inadmissible. But in my memory. In my understanding. In the careful mental catalogue of who said what, when, and in front of how many witnesses. Evidence isn't just documents and recordings. Sometimes evidence is pattern. Sometimes evidence is character. Sometimes evidence is giving someone enough rope and enough audience and enough champagne that they hang themselves with their own words. I circled back toward the kitchen. My phone buzzed again. Marcus. Called property manager. He's getting impatient. Please advise. I stopped in the hallway. Typed. Trust me. Stay outside. We'll explain everything. Deleted it. Typed instead. Handling some complications. Need 1 more hour. Sent. Then I picked up a tray of hors d'oeuvres. Adjusted my apron. And instead of ending this, I tied it tighter. The silence wasn't weakness. The silence was a weapon. And I was just getting started. The apron changed everything. Not for me, for them. I noticed it on my 6th pass through the room. The way conversations shifted when I approached. Not stopped. Shifted. Like a radio adjusting frequency. The volume stayed the same, but the content changed channels. From careful to casual. From public to private. From performed to real. A woman near the fireplace was complaining about her contractor. And I told him, I don't care if you have to pay them under the table, just make sure they show up on time. I mean, that's what cash is for, right? Her friend laughed. Sipped champagne. Didn't even glance at me as I collected their empty glasses. 2 men by the bookshelf were discussing a business deal. The audit won't find anything if we move it through the Cayman account first. That's literally what those accounts are for. Smart. Elementary, really. I moved between them, offering fresh drinks. They didn't pause. Didn't lower their voices. Didn't register that another human being, one with ears, with memory, with a bar license, was standing right there. Once the apron was on, I wasn't a person anymore. I was furniture that happened to carry champagne. Near the garden doors, a group was discussing schools. We donated enough to ensure legacy status, a man was saying. It's not about the money per se. It's about maintaining continuity. Keeping the right families in the pipeline. Absolutely. Though the new diversity requirements are making things complicated. Don't get me started. This from a woman with pearls that probably cost more than a year of tuition. They accepted someone from our district last year, public school if you can imagine, and her parents made a whole thing about financial aid. Made everyone uncomfortable. How gauche. Exactly. I refilled their glasses. Not one of them looked at me. The woman with the pearls continued. I heard she dropped out after 1 semester anyway. Couldn't keep up. Which proves the point. There's a reason for standards. Some people just aren't built for excellence. They all nodded. I stood there, invisible, and thought about the fact that I'd graduated summa cum laude from the same public school system they were dismissing. Thought about my grandmother, who'd put herself through law school washing dishes in restaurants exactly like this one. Thought about the daughter they just casually erased, who'd probably dropped out because she couldn't afford books, or housing, or the 1,000 invisible costs that legacy families never have to calculate. But I didn't say any of that. I just smiled. And remembered every word. By the 8th pass, I'd started to see it. The pattern. Not just what they were saying, but how they were saying it. The casual admissions. The brazen confessions. The things they'd never say in public but said freely here, in this space, surrounded by their own. Tax evasion disguised as financial planning. Discrimination disguised as maintaining standards. Corruption disguised as how things work. And all of it spoken in normal voices, with normal laughter, like they were discussing the weather. Because they thought they were safe. They thought this space, my grandmother's house, my house, was a sanctuary where consequences didn't exist. Where the help didn't count. Where words disappeared into the air without leaving evidence. Sterling was the loudest, but he wasn't the only one. Near the piano, a woman was explaining how she'd gotten her son out of a DUI. The officer was very understanding once we explained who we were. No charges filed. Not even a record. That's good police work. That's good policing. By the bar, a man was discussing a zoning hearing. We made sure the opposition didn't have proper notice. Technical error, officially. But it cleared the way for approval. Brilliant. Basic strategy. In the corner, 3 people were laughing about an employee they'd fired. She threatened to sue, of course. They always do. But once we mentioned her visa status, she got very quiet. I bet she did. More laughter. I circulated. Smiled. Listened. And the mask I was wearing, this apron, this invisibility, had become the most powerful tool in the room. Sterling's voice cut through the ambient noise. Speaking of which, has anyone seen the new diversity hire at the courthouse? My body went still. I was across the room, refilling glasses at a different cluster. But my ears locked onto his voice like a targeting system. Which court? Someone asked. Federal. Southern District. Judge appointment. Very celebrated. Very diverse. He said diverse the way other people say suspicious. She's younger than my daughter. Can you imagine? Patricia's voice. I saw the announcement. Very impressive credentials. On paper. On paper. Sterling laughed. Exactly. But between you and me, there's impressive and there's qualified. And sometimes those things don't overlap. What do you mean? I mean that sometimes appointments are made for reasons other than merit. Political reasons. Optics reasons. Box-checking reasons. My hands were shaking. I set down the tray before anyone could notice. Are you saying? Patricia lowered her voice. I stepped closer, pretending to collect empty glasses from a nearby table. You're saying she's not qualified? I'm saying she's 39 years old. I'm saying she went to a state school for undergrad. I'm saying her judicial record is thin at best. I'm saying that if she looked different, had a different name, came from a different background, would she have been appointed? That's the question no one's allowed to ask. But someone should. Someone should. I stood there, 2 feet away, holding an empty glass, hearing them discuss whether I deserved my career, whether I'd earned my seat, whether I was qualified to do the job I'd been doing for 3 years with a record that had never been overturned on appeal. And the joke, the bitter, perfect joke, was that they were saying all of this in front of me, to my face, while I held their garbage. I walked back to the kitchen, set down the glasses. Diana looked up. You okay? You look pale. I'm fine. My voice came out steady. Just need some water. Take 5. You've earned it. I went to the hallway, pulled out my phone. My hands were still shaking, but not from anger anymore. From adrenaline. From the cold, clear understanding of what I now possessed. Not just Sterling's plan to force me out. Not just casual admissions of tax fraud and bribery and discrimination. But personal attacks on my qualifications. My merit. My right to exist in professional spaces. Attacks made in a semi-public forum. In front of witnesses. By a man who did business with federal courts. Who probably had cases pending in those courts. Who might, at any moment, appear before a judge he'd just spent an evening claiming was unqualified. I opened my notes app. Started typing. Every name I'd heard. Every admission. Every witness to every conversation. The tax evasion. The zoning fraud. The visa threat. The police corruption. The legacy admissions bribery. And Sterling's comments about my appointment. All of it. Time-stamped. Detailed. Documented. Not for a courtroom, not yet. But because I understood something my grandmother had taught me. Power confesses itself when it feels safe. And right now, because of this apron, because of this mask, because of my silence, they felt completely safe. Which meant they were going to keep talking. And I was going to keep listening. I put my phone away, adjusted my apron one more time, and walked back into the room. The mask wasn't just concealing me anymore. It was weaponizing me. And they had no idea. I saw him before he saw me, standing near the entrance to the conservatory, holding a champagne flute he clearly wasn't drinking from. Early 20s. Uncomfortable in his suit. Eyes scanning the room like he was looking for an exit. Or a familiar face. He found mine. And stopped. I watched the recognition happen in real time. The double take. The confusion. The rapid mental calculation of why is my old piano teacher holding a serving tray? Because that's who I was to him. Or who I'd been. 7 years ago, the summer after his freshman year of college, when his mother, Patricia of the Diamonds and the barely cold champagne complaint, had hired me to teach him piano. I'd been in law school, taking any work I could find. 3 lessons a week, $50 per hour, in this very house. My grandmother's house, though I hadn't told anyone that. Just another summer job. Just another way to pay tuition. Marcus. His name was Marcus. And he was walking toward me. I set down my tray. Felt my entire strategy. The silence, the observation, the careful invisibility, about to collapse. Because Marcus knew me. Not as a server. As a person. As someone with a name, a history, a graduate degree and a bar exam and a career trajectory that had ended with a federal appointment. And if he said my name, if he said, Judge Vance. Or even just, Olivia. The game was over. Sterling would hear. Patricia would hear. The entire room would recalibrate, and I'd lose the one advantage I had. Their belief that I didn't matter. Marcus stopped 3 feet away. Opened his mouth. I shook my head. Once. Tiny movement. Almost imperceptible. But he saw it. His mouth closed. We stood there, frozen in a moment of mutual understanding. He knew who I was. I knew he knew. And he was deciding, right now, in real time, what to do with that knowledge. Behind him, I could hear his mother's voice. The problem with participation trophies is that they create unrealistic expectations. Marcus's jaw tightened. He looked at me. Then at the apron. Then back at my face. And I saw the moment he understood. Not just that I was here. But why I was here. Why I was silent. Why I was serving champagne to people who'd known me in a completely different context. His eyes widened slightly. Then, he stepped back, picked up his champagne, and said, loudly enough for the people near us to hear, "Could I get some water instead?" "Of course, sir," I said, voice pitched to my server register. "Still or sparkling?" "Still is fine." He held my gaze for one more second, then turned and walked away. Not toward his mother. Away from her. Toward the garden doors. Away from the party. I exhaled, picked up my tray, and continued circulating. 10 minutes later, I was in the butler's pantry, refilling water glasses, when he appeared in the doorway. "I'm not going to say anything," he said quietly. I looked up. Marcus was leaning against the doorframe, hands in his pockets, looking less like Patricia's son and more like the kid who'd struggled through Chopin's nocturnes and told me he only took piano lessons because his mother insisted. "I appreciate that," I said. "But I want to know why." He stepped into the pantry, checked over his shoulder to make sure no one was listening. "Why are you serving champagne at my mother's party?" "It's not your mother's party." "What?" "It's my party. In my house." I set down the water pitcher. Met his eyes. "Your mother is a guest. She just doesn't know it yet." Marcus stared at me. Then, slowly, understanding dawned. "You're the granddaughter." Not a question. A realization. "You're the one Sterling's been." He stopped. "Been what?" I asked. His face went pale. "You heard him." "I've heard everything." "Oh my God." Marcus ran his hand through his hair. Oh my God. That's why you're listening. You're gathering information, I finished. Yes. Silence. Heavy. Weighted with the implications of what I'd just confirmed. Marcus looked at me. Then at the door. Then back at me. My mother, he said slowly. She complained about you. To you. Without knowing. Yes. And Sterling's been planning to. Yes. And you've just been standing there. Listening. Letting them. Yes. Another pause. Then. That's brilliant. I blinked. That's brilliant, he repeated. They think you're nobody. So they're telling you everything. That's the idea. Does anyone else know? Just you. And my lawyer, who's currently sitting outside wondering why I haven't shown up yet. Marcus nodded slowly. Processing. Then, what are you going to do? I haven't decided yet. But you're going to do something. Eventually. When? I picked up the water pitcher again. When I know everything. When they've said enough that they can't take it back. And then I'll decide if I want to own a house full of people who think I don't belong here. I met his eyes. Or if I want to own a house full of people who know exactly who I am and what they said to my face. Marcus absorbed this. Then, for what it's worth, my mother's wrong. About the champagne temperature and about everything else. I know. And Sterling's wrong. About you being unqualified. I know that too. And he hesitated. I'm sorry. That you had to hear any of that. Don't be. I started toward the door. Paused. Turned back. You didn't say anything. You could have exposed me. Ended this. Protected your mother from whatever's coming. I know. Why didn't you? Marcus looked at me for a long moment. Because 7 years ago, you were the only person in my life who treated me like I was more than my mother's son. You taught me Chopin. You told me it was okay that I wasn't good at piano. You said some people are better at other things. He smiled sadly. And because I've spent 23 years watching my mother treat people like you're treating her right now. Like they're invisible. Like they don't count. His voice hardened. Maybe it's time she learned what that feels like. I stood there, water pitcher in hand, and felt something shift. Not in my plan. In my understanding of what this was. This wasn't just about me anymore. It wasn't just about my grandmother's house or Sterling's conspiracy or Patricia's casual cruelty. It was about every person who'd ever been invisible. Every person who'd been dismissed, underestimated, erased. Every person who'd stood in a room full of power and been treated like furniture. Marcus was giving me permission to do what I was already doing. But more than that. He was telling me it mattered. Thank you, I said. He nodded. Then stepped aside to let me pass. I walked back into the party. And this time, when I saw Patricia complaining about something to her circle of friends, when I heard Sterling's laugh cutting through the ambient noise, when I felt the weight of the apron and the tray and the mask I was wearing, I didn't feel small. I felt powerful. Because I wasn't alone anymore. Someone saw me. And he'd chosen to stay silent. Not to protect himself. To protect the truth. The party had reached that point. The dangerous point. Where the champagne had been flowing long enough that inhibitions loosened. Where the room felt safe enough that people stopped performing and started revealing. Where the mask of civility began to slip. I'd seen it before, in courtrooms. The moment when a witness gets comfortable on the stand. When they forget they're being recorded. When they start answering questions with truth instead of strategy. This was that moment. Except there was no judge. No jury. Just me. And my tray. Same glass. I'd noticed it 3 rounds ago. Crystal. Monogrammed. The kind that costs $200 and comes in a locked cabinet. Sterling had been drinking from it all night. Empty. Refill. Empty. Refill. The pattern was mechanical now. He'd lift his hand without looking. I'd take the empty. Replace it with full. He never thanked me. Never acknowledged the exchange. Just kept talking. The environmental report was problematic, obviously. But we found an assessor who was more flexible in his interpretation. Refill. 3 violations, technically. But the inspector was very understanding once we explained the situation, and made a generous donation to his son's baseball team. Refill. She threatened to go to the press. But we had pictures from her college years. Nothing illegal, just, let's say, colorful. Problem solved. Refill. Ice cracking. Laughter rising. His voice getting louder. His admissions getting bolder. And me, invisible, replacing his empty glass with a full one. Over. And over. And over. Near the fireplace, Patricia had gathered her own audience. 5 women. All diamonds. All expensive haircuts. All that particular brand of wealthy that mistakes money for virtue. The problem with public schools is that they've lowered standards to accommodate everyone. When I was young, education meant excellence. Absolutely. Now it's all about feelings and inclusion and making sure no one's uncomfortable. So true. I approached with a tray of hors d'oeuvres. Patricia took one without looking. Continued. My cleaning woman's daughter goes to the public high school. Sweet girl, apparently. But she's planning to apply to college. College. She said it like space travel. Can you imagine? She'll take a spot from someone who actually belongs there. That's the problem with affirmative action. It's discrimination against qualified candidates. Someone should sue. They all nodded. All agreed. All ignored the woman standing 2 feet away holding their food. I moved to the next cluster. Tom, the one who'd questioned whether Sterling could actually pressure a federal judge, had moved to the library. Away from the main party. Quieter conversation. More intimate. I followed. Restocked the bar cart near where he was standing. Polished already clean glasses. Stayed busy. Stayed invisible. Tom was on his phone. FaceTime with someone. No, I'm telling you, it's handled. The judge signed off this morning. Settlement approved. They have no idea we lowballed them by 40%. Pause. Laughter. Right. And the best part is they think they won. They're celebrating. Meanwhile, we saved $8 million and set precedent for the next case. Another pause. Exactly. You just have to find the right judge. Someone young. Someone eager to clear their docket. Someone who doesn't look too carefully at the math. He ended the call. Turned around. Saw me. Looked right through me. More scotch, he said. Held out his glass. I poured. He didn't say thank you. Just walked back toward the party. And I stood there, in the library of my house, having just witnessed a lawyer admit to defrauding his clients. To their faces. To the room. To me. By the 10th round, I could see it clearly. The pattern. The escalation. The way each admission gave permission for the next one. Sterling's corruption normalized Tom's fraud. Tom's fraud normalized Patricia's bigotry. Patricia's bigotry normalized someone else's cruelty. And on and on. Each confession lowering the bar for the next. Each laugh giving permission for the next joke. Each moment of getting away with it building confidence for the next transgression. I moved through the room. Server. Observer. Recorder. And I watched them become more reckless with every glass. More brazen with every laugh. More certain that this space, this house, this party, this moment, was consequence-free. That they were safe. That they were among friends. That the invisible woman carrying the champagne tray couldn't touch them. Near the garden doors, someone dropped a glass. Shatter. Crystal exploding against marble. Champagne spreading. The room paused. Brief moment of attention. Brief moment of visibility. Everyone looking. I set down my tray. Knelt. Started collecting the pieces. Sharp edges. Careful hands. Above me, conversation resumed. Clumsy. Probably had too much herself. Laughter. I kept collecting glass. Patricia's voice, somewhere above me. This is why you hire professionals. More laughter. I stood. Carried the broken pieces to the kitchen. Diana looked up. You okay? Fine. They're getting drunk. Just stay clear of Sterling's group. They're getting loud. I noticed. I went back out. Fresh tray. Fresh smile. And this time, when I approached Sterling's circle, when I heard his voice rising, his laugh getting sharper, his admissions getting bolder, I didn't flinch. I leaned in. Because the drunker they got, the more they revealed. The louder they got, the more witnesses heard. The safer they felt, the more reckless they became. They were giving me everything. And they didn't even know it. The champagne kept flowing. The glasses kept emptying. The secrets kept spilling. And I kept catching every drop. I was refilling the ice bucket when it hit me. The smell. Industrial cleaner. That particular chemical sharpness that strips everything. Dirt, scent, dignity, down to nothing. Someone had spilled red wine near the bar, and Diana was attacking it with the same industrial-grade solution we'd used at. My hands stopped. The ice scoop suspended mid-air. And suddenly I wasn't in my grandmother's house anymore. I was 23. First year of law school. Night shift at Covington and Hale. The building had 73 floors, I knew because I cleaned 68 of them. 11 p.m. to 6 a.m., 5 nights a week. Vacuum. Dust. Empty trash. Scrub toilets. Polish conference tables where, during daylight hours, lawyers billed clients $800 per hour. I made $12 per hour. Sometimes 13 if I worked past 2 a.m. The math was simple. Law school tuition was $52,000 per year. Scholarships covered half. Loans covered another quarter. The remaining $13,000 had to come from somewhere, so I cleaned. Mop bucket. Vacuum cord. Trash bags. Industrial cleaner. And law books. Balanced on the cleaning cart. Propped against the wall in utility closets. Open on the floor while I scrubbed. Constitutional law while I vacuumed the 42nd floor. Contracts while I cleaned the bathrooms on 55, torts while I emptied trash cans that cost more than my monthly rent. It was a Thursday, I remember, because Thursdays were partner meetings, which meant they always ran late, which meant I had to clean around them. I was on the 68th floor. Executive conference room. The meeting was ending. Men in suits filing out. Laughter. Handshakes. The loose, comfortable energy of people who'd just made money. I waited in the hallway. Mop bucket. Wet floor sign. Con law textbook balanced on top. One partner stopped. Looked at me. Looked at the book. Studying for the GED? He asked. Not cruel. Just casual. Just assuming. Law school, I said. Second semester. His eyebrows lifted. Surprise. Then something else. Skepticism. Which school? I told him. He nodded slowly. That's ambitious. Ambitious. Not impressive. Not admirable. Ambitious. The word people use when they think you're reaching above your station. Good luck with that, he said. Then walked away. I stood there. Mop bucket. Wet floor sign. And understood something fundamental. He hadn't been cruel, he'd been honest. In his world, in the world I was trying to enter, someone who cleaned floors at night couldn't possibly be someone who argued cases during the day. The roles were fixed. The categories were clear. And crossing between them was ambitious. Which meant unlikely. Which meant impossible. I could have quit. Could have found a different job. Something during the day. Something where I didn't have to smell industrial cleaner and fight to stay awake through 3 a.m. study sessions. Something where people didn't assume I was studying for a GED. But I didn't. Because that partner, that casual dismissal, that ambitious, had shown me something valuable. People's assumptions are their weakness. When someone decides who you are based on what you're holding, they stop paying attention to what you're capable of. When someone sees a mop and assumes limits, they don't bother to defend against what you're actually doing. I finished my shift, cleaned all 68 floors, and the next day I went to class. The next week, I aced my contracts exam. The next month, I was invited to join law review. And 3 years later, I graduated summa cum laude. With honors. With offers. With the same constitutional law textbook I'd balanced on a mop bucket. The partner probably never remembered our conversation. Probably never thought about the cleaning woman who was ambitious. But I remembered that being underestimated is only a disadvantage if you correct the misunderstanding too early. And I remembered that sometimes the best strategy isn't to prove you belonged, it's to let them think you don't. Until the moment proving it matters. You okay? Diana's voice pulled me back. I was still holding the ice scoop. Still in my grandmother's kitchen. Still wearing the apron. Yeah, I said. Just remembering something. This job's getting to you. She said it kindly. It gets to everyone eventually. Rich people are exhausting. I smiled, set down the scoop, picked up a fresh tray. They really are, I agreed, and walked back into the party. But this time, when I heard Sterling's laugh, when I felt the weight of invisible dismissal, when someone handed me their trash without looking, I didn't feel diminished. I felt familiar. I'd been here before. Different building, different role, different stake, but the same essential dynamic. People assuming I was nobody. While I studied everything. People assuming I couldn't touch them. While I learned exactly how to my grandmother used to say, every empire falls because someone powerful forgot to watch the help. I hadn't understood her then. I was 23. Tired. Convinced that visibility equaled power. But now I understood. The industrial cleaner smell was still in my nose. The memory of that partner's dismissal still sharp. And I realized, nothing about tonight was new. This was just a different floor of the same building. Different expensive people making the same expensive mistakes. Assuming the woman cleaning up after them couldn't possibly be the woman who'd end them. Ambitious, he'd said. He'd been right. Just not the way he'd meant. She arrived during my 11th round. Young. Maybe 19. Definitely not one of Diana's regular crew. Carrying a tray of champagne like it might explode. Nervous hands. Wide eyes. The body language of someone who'd never worked a party like this before. Diana intercepted her at the kitchen door. You're late. I'm sorry, the bus was. Doesn't matter. You're here now. Take this tray. Circulate. Smile. Don't speak unless someone asks you a direct question. Got it? Yes, ma'am. The girl took the tray. Her hands were shaking. I watched her push through the door into the party. Watched her navigate the crowd with the careful precision of someone terrified of making a mistake. And I saw myself 7 years ago, 12 years ago. Every version of myself that had ever held a tray or a mop or a textbook and tried to be invisible enough to survive but visible enough to be useful. I went back to work. The girl made it through 3 rounds. She was good. Careful. Attentive. But she was also clearly exhausted. I caught glimpses of her between my own circuits. The way she'd pause between clusters of guests. The way she'd close her eyes for just a second, gathering strength. The way she'd check her watch when she thought no one was looking. She had somewhere else to be, or somewhere she'd rather be, or maybe just the bone-deep exhaustion of someone working multiple jobs to make rent. I knew that exhaustion. Had lived it. Still dreamed about it sometimes. That specific tiredness that comes from staying upright when your body is screaming to stop. I was near the library when I heard the crash. Champagne hitting marble sounds like breaking. Like a small explosion of expensive mistake. The room froze. That specific silence that happens when someone does something wrong in public. I turned. The girl was standing in the center of the foyer. Tray on the ground. Crystal shattered. Champagne spreading in a pale gold pool. And Sterling's suit soaked from waist to knee. Jesus Christ. He jumped back. Too late. The damage was done. I'm so sorry, the girl's voice shook. You turned and I didn't. I'm so sorry. Do you have any idea what this suit costs? Sterling's face was red. From champagne or anger or both. I'm sorry, You'll what? Pay for it. He laughed. Mean. Sharp. I doubt you make in a month what this jacket cost. The girl's face went white. The room was watching now. All of them. Watching this young woman, this exhausted, terrified, 19-year-old woman, get destroyed by a man whose voice I'd been listening to all night. A man who'd admitted to fraud, to bribery, to conspiracy. A man who was now performing righteous indignation over a suit he probably had 12 more of in his closet. I stood there, tray in hand, 10 feet away, and felt everything I'd been doing, the observation, the silence, the strategic invisibility, pull against something older, something that had nothing to do with strategy. The girl was crying now, trying not to, failing. I don't have time for this. Sterling pulled out his phone. Diana, your server just ruined a $5,000 suit. I want her fired. Now. Please. The girl whispered. Please, I need this job. Should have thought of that before you. It was an accident. Accidents have consequences. The room watched. Some looked uncomfortable. Most looked entertained. Patricia was near the fireplace, whispering to her circle, probably saying something about standards, about hiring better help, about how this never would have happened if. My feet were moving before I decided to move them. Across the foyer, through the watching crowd, straight to the girl. I knelt, started picking up Crystal. It's okay, I said quietly. It was an accident. I'm so sorry. Don't apologize to me. I looked up at Sterling, met his eyes for the first time all night. Apologize to him. He's the one who turned around without looking where he was going. Silence. Different silence than before. Sterling stared at me. Excuse me. You turned around. My voice was calm. Level. She was standing behind you with a tray. You turned directly into her path. It was your fault. His face went from red to purple. How dare you? I saw it happen. I stood. Collected the last piece of crystal. So did half the room. You weren't paying attention. You moved into her space. You caused the collision. I don't have to listen to this from who? I kept my voice even. From someone who watched what actually happened. Sterling's eyes narrowed. Really looked at me for the first time. Saw the apron. Saw the tray I'd set down. Saw the server who'd been invisible all night suddenly speaking. You're fired too, he said. You can't fire me. Watch me. Diana. Diana doesn't have the authority to fire me. I held his gaze. Neither do you. This is He stopped. Looked around. Seemed to remember that he was making a scene. This is unacceptable. I want both of you out. Now. No. The word hung in the air. Simple. Flat. Final. Sterling's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. What did you just say to me? I said no. I turned to the girl. What's your name? Sarah. Sarah, go to the kitchen. Get some water. Take a break. You're not fired. She absolutely is, Sterling started. I turned back to him. And let the mask drop. Not all the way. Not yet. But enough that something in my expression, something in my voice, my posture, my absolute certainty, made him stop. This conversation is over, I said quietly. Sarah will continue working. You will go change your suit. And if you speak to her again, if you speak to any of the staff like that again, we will have a very different kind of conversation. Who the hell do you think you? I think I'm done listening to you tonight. I picked up my tray, helped Sarah to her feet, and walked her to the kitchen. Behind us, the party was silent. Everyone watching. Everyone confused. Everyone trying to understand what just happened. I'd broken character. I'd intervened. I'd crossed the line from observer to participant. And I'd done it for someone who had nothing to do with my plan. Someone who just reminded me too much of who I used to be to let her face that alone. In the kitchen, Sarah was still shaking. "Thank you," she whispered. "I thought. I know what you thought." I handed her a glass of water. "But you didn't deserve that. It wasn't your fault. But that man is a bully. Bullies perform loudest when they have an audience." Diana appeared, clipboard in hand, face tight. "What the hell was that?" "That was Sterling being Sterling," I said. "Sarah stays. If he has a problem with it, he can take it up with me." "And who exactly are you two?" I met her eyes. Something in my expression made her stop. "Sarah stays," I repeated. "Understood." Diana looked at me. Then at Sarah. Then back at me. "Fine," she said slowly. "But if he complains again." "He won't." Diana left. Sarah was staring at me. "Who are you?" "Good question. 10 minutes ago, I was invisible. A server. An observer. A strategy wrapped in an apron. Now I defended someone. Publicly. In front of everyone. Including Sterling. The man I'd been watching all night. The man whose words I'd been collecting. The man who now knew, who now felt, that the invisible woman with the champagne tray was something other than what she appeared to be. I'd compromised my cover. Changed the dynamic. Shifted the mission. For a girl I'd never met. Because watching her get destroyed for an accident. Because hearing Sterling use his power to hurt someone powerless. Because remembering what it felt like to be that girl. I couldn't stay silent. Not for that. "I'm someone who used to be exactly where you are," I told Sarah. "And I'm someone who's not going to let that man treat you like you're disposable." She nodded slowly. "Thank you," she said again. I squeezed her shoulder. Then went back out into the party. The strategy had changed. The mission had shifted. But as I walked back into that room, as I felt every eye on me, felt Sterling's glare burning into my back, felt the weight of having broken my own rule about staying invisible, I didn't regret it. Some things matter more than strategy. Some lines can't be uncrossed. And some moments require you to choose between the person you're pretending to be and the person you actually are. I'd made my choice. Now I'd deal with the consequences. Sterling was watching me now. Really watching. Not through me. Not past me. At me. I felt it every time I crossed his line of sight. That sharp, calculating attention. The attention you give to a problem that needs solving. I'd been invisible for 2 hours. Now I was visible. And visibility, in a room full of secrets, was dangerous. I continued circulating. But the dynamic had changed. Before, people spoke freely because I didn't exist. Now, they spoke carefully because they weren't sure what I was. Beat 2. The conversation shift. Sterling had moved to a corner table. Private conversation. 3 men. All expensive suits. All serious faces. I approached with water glasses. They stopped talking. Waited until I left. Resumed in lower voices. I caught fragments. Liability exposure. Need to document everything. If anyone asks. This was new. This wasn't bragging. This wasn't casual cruelty or champagne-fueled confession. This was damage control. And I understood. Sterling wasn't just worried about being rude to staff. He was worried about what the staff had heard. I went back to the kitchen. Set down my tray. Pulled out my phone. Opened my notes. Started adding timestamps to everything I documented. 9:47 p.m. Sterling admits to bribing building inspector. 10:15 p.m. Patricia discusses discriminatory housing practices. 10:33 p.m. Tom admits to defrauding clients in settlement. 10:52 p.m. Sterling outlines plan to force heir from property through systematic harassment. The list was long, detailed, specific. And as I looked at it, really looked at it, I saw something I hadn't fully registered before. This wasn't just gossip. This was evidence. Real evidence. Of real crimes. I'd been thinking about this wrong. I'd been thinking like someone who'd been insulted. Someone who'd been dismissed and underestimated and wanted to teach a lesson about assumptions. But I wasn't just someone. I was a judge. A federal judge. With a duty. With ethical obligations. With a responsibility that didn't stop just because I was wearing an apron. The conversations I'd overheard. Bribery of public officials. Federal crime. 18 U.S.C. Section 201. Housing discrimination. Federal crime. Fair Housing Act violations. Wire fraud in the settlement. Federal crime. 18 U.S.C. Section 1343. Conspiracy to harass. Civil rights violations. Possibly criminal depending on methods. This wasn't just people being terrible at a party. This was actionable. Prosecutable. Criminal. My phone buzzed. Marcus, lawyer still outside. Starting to worry. Please confirm you're okay. I stared at the message. Then typed. I need you to come inside. Bring your recording equipment. We need to talk. Marcus, recording equipment? What's going on? Just bring it. Side entrance. Text when you're here. Marcus. On my way. I put the phone away. Looked at myself in the polished refrigerator one more time. The apron. The invisible uniform. But I wasn't invisible anymore. And I wasn't just collecting secrets for personal satisfaction anymore. I was collecting evidence. I picked up a fresh tray. Walked back into the party. But this time, I wasn't hunting for confessions to embarrass people later. I was hunting for admissible evidence to prosecute them now. Different goal. Different stakes. Different responsibility. Sterling was still in his corner. Still talking in low voices. Still trying to contain whatever damage he thought I might cause. I approached slowly. Refilled water glasses at the next table. Close enough to hear. Paperwork fixes everything, Sterling was saying. That's what you need to understand. Documentation. Process. Make it look legitimate. Even if it's not. Especially if it's not. Sterling leaned back. Smiled. The law doesn't care about reality. It cares about what you can prove. And if the paperwork says something happened legally, then legally, it happened. One of the other men shifted uncomfortably. I don't know, Sterling. That sounds like business. Sterling's tone hardened. This is how things work. You want to play in this league, you need to understand that rules are for people who can't afford lawyers. My hand tightened on the water pitcher. Obstruction of justice. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Corrupt practices. All of it. Right there. Said clearly enough that intent was obvious. Specific enough that prosecution was possible. And Sterling had no idea that the woman pouring his water had spent the last 3 years ruling on cases exactly like this. Had sent people to prison for exactly this. Had developed a reputation for being unmerciful to white-collar criminals who thought rules didn't apply to them. I finished pouring. Moved to the next table. And felt the full weight of what I was sitting on. This wasn't about teaching Sterling a lesson about assumptions anymore. This wasn't about proving I belonged in my grandmother's house. This wasn't even about protecting myself from his harassment campaign. This was about the law. About justice. About the fundamental principle that no one, no matter how rich, how connected, how protected, is above consequences. My grandmother used to say, the law works best when it's enforced by people who remember what it's like to have no power. I'd thought she meant empathy, understanding, compassion for the vulnerable. But now I understood she also meant something harder. The willingness to use power against the powerful. To prosecute those who think they're untouchable. To bring consequences to people who've spent their entire lives avoiding them. I set down the water pitcher. Pulled out my phone. Opened my notes. Added one more entry. 11:34 p.m. Sterling advocates for document fraud as business strategy. Direct quote. Rules are for people who can't afford lawyers. 3 witnesses present. Then I sent a different text. To the U.S. Attorney's Office. To my former colleague in the Public Corruption Unit. To someone who would know what to do with what I was about to give them. Need to talk. Tonight, if possible. I've witnessed multiple federal crimes. Have detailed notes. Will explain. The response came 30 seconds later. Call me. Now. I looked at the party. At Sterling, still talking. At Patricia, still laughing. At Tom, still drinking. All of them comfortable. All of them safe. All of them certain that tonight would end the way every night ended for people like them. With no consequences. I smiled. Put my phone away. And went back to work. But I wasn't serving anymore. I was documenting. Every word. Every admission. Every federal crime committed in my house. By people who'd forgotten that justice doesn't stop watching just because you can't see it. The genre had shifted. This wasn't a story about humiliation anymore. It was a story about prosecution. And everyone who'd confessed tonight was about to learn the difference. Sterling was drunk now. Not sloppy drunk. Not loud drunk. The dangerous kind of drunk. The kind where inhibitions dissolve but articulation stays sharp. Where you say exactly what you mean because you've forgotten why you shouldn't. He'd moved back to the fireplace. Larger audience now. 8 people. Maybe 9. All listening like he was giving a TED Talk instead of confessing to crimes. I approached with coffee. Strong. Black. Diana had started brewing it 20 minutes ago. Trying to sober people up before they drove home or said something they'd regret. Too late for that. And that's the thing people don't understand about wealth preservation, Sterling was saying. It's not about making money. It's about protecting it from people who think they deserve a piece. The government, someone said. The government. Employees. Ex-wives. The endless parade of people with their hands out. He took the coffee I offered. Didn't look at me. You have to be creative. Aggressive. Willing to do what others won't. Like what? Patricia asked. She was enjoying this. Her voice had that eager, gossipy quality of someone who loved hearing about rule-breaking. Sterling smiled. Like the Anderson deal. The name meant nothing to me. But several people in the circle shifted. Tom, the hawk-faced lawyer, cleared his throat. Sterling, maybe we shouldn't. Why not? Sterling gestured broadly. It's brilliant. It's legal. Technically. Technically, Tom repeated, warning in his voice. Sterling ignored him. The Andersons owned property in the Riverside development. Prime location. 50 acres. They'd been there for 3 generations. Past tense. Had owned. Had been there. I poured more coffee. Stayed close. They didn't want to sell, Sterling continued. Family legacy. Historical significance. All the sentimental nonsense that poor people mistake for actual value. Laughter. Uncomfortable laughter from some. Enthusiastic laughter from others. So we made them want to sell. How? Patricia leaned in. Started with code violations. Found an inspector who was motivated. Suddenly the property wasn't up to standards. Electrical. Plumbing. Foundation. Every inspection found something new. That's just enforcement, someone said. That's selective enforcement, Sterling corrected. Their neighbors had the same violations. But only the Andersons got cited. More laughter. Then came the taxes. Property reassessment. Turns out their land was worth significantly more than they thought. More value means more taxes. Taxes they couldn't afford. Beautiful, Patricia breathed. It gets better. Sterling was warming to his story now. Performing. The bank that held their mortgage? We happened to have a relationship with the board. Suddenly, their loan terms changed. Interest rate adjustment. Some clause in the fine print about delinquent property taxes. Payment went from $2,000 a month to $6,000. Jesus, someone whispered. And when they couldn't pay? Sterling paused for effect. Foreclosure. Property went to auction. And who do you think was the only bidder? Silence. Understanding. We got 50 acres of prime development land for 60 cents on the dollar. That's, Tom started. That's business, Sterling finished. That's how you build wealth. That's how you maintain standards in a community. You can't let sentiment interfere with value. My hands were shaking. The coffee pot was shaking. I set it down before anyone noticed. What happened to the Andersons? Someone asked. Sterling shrugged. Moved away somewhere. Who cares? They were blocking progress. Someone had to remove the obstacle. Remove the obstacle. The words came out of my mouth before I could stop them. Everyone turned. Sterling looked at me. Really looked. For the second time tonight. Did you say something? I should have backed down. Should have apologized. Should have returned to invisibility. Instead, I said, you called them an obstacle. Yes. And they were a family. Silence. Heavy. Weighted with the sudden understanding that I'd broken protocol again. Sterling's eyes narrowed. They were an obstacle to development. To progress. To the improvement of that entire corridor. They were people. They were people who owned property they couldn't maintain. Property that was better used in other hands. Your hands. Hands that could actually develop it. Yes. His voice had gone cold. What's your point? I should have stopped. Should have remembered I was supposed to be observing. Should have kept the mask on. But I just listened to this man describe, with pride, a systematic campaign to destroy a family. To use government corruption, bank fraud, and selective enforcement to steal land. To remove an obstacle. And he thought it was brilliant. My point, I said quietly, is that what you just described is illegal. Sterling laughed. Not nervous laughter. Genuine amusement. Illegal? Everything we did was documented. Inspected. Approved. Legal. Selective enforcement is discrimination, I said. Coordinating with a bank to manipulate loan terms is fraud. Conspiracy to deprive someone of property rights is a federal crime. The room had gone completely silent now. Everyone staring. At me. At Sterling. At the server who was suddenly speaking like a lawyer. Sterling's smile faded. Who the hell are you? Someone who knows the law when she hears it being broken. Your staff, he said slowly. Your hired help. You don't get to have opinions about federal crimes committed in front of witnesses? I set down the coffee pot. I think everyone gets to have opinions about that. Tom stood up. Sterling stopped talking. No. Sterling stood too. I want to know who this woman thinks she is. I want to know why she thinks she can. Can what? I interrupted. Can hear you? Can understand what you're saying? Can remember that in this country, conspiracy to defraud is prosecutable regardless of how creative you think you were. Patricia's voice sharp. You need to leave. This is my house, I said. This is. She stopped. Looked around. Looked at Sterling. What? This house, I repeated slowly, belongs to me. Your guests. All of you. Understanding rippled through the room. Slowly at first. Then faster. Patricia's face went white. You're the granddaughter. Yes. Sterling's expression cycled through confusion, recognition, denial, panic. You're the judge, he said. Yes. And you've been standing here all night. Listening. I finished. Yes. That's entrapment. That's not what entrapment means. My voice was calm. Professional. The voice I used in court. Entrapment requires inducement by law enforcement to commit a crime. I didn't induce anything. I just stood here while you confessed. I didn't confess to anything. You admitted to bribery of a public official, to conspiracy with a financial institution to commit fraud, to systematic harassment to deprive citizens of property rights. I pulled out my phone, opened my notes. You described in detail a pattern of corruption that destroyed a family. And you did it in front of. I counted the witnesses. 9 people. Tom had his head in his hands. Sterling, stop talking. Seriously. Stop talking. But Sterling was past the point of caution. Past the point of strategy. All that was left was rage. You tricked us. I served you champagne, I said. You chose to talk. You were pretending to be. I was being exactly what you assumed I was. That's not my fault. That's yours. You can't use any of this. It's inadmissible. Actually, I said quietly, most of it is admissible. You made voluntary statements in a semi-public setting with no expectation of privacy. Multiple witnesses. No coercion. No interrogation. I looked around the room. At all of them. At their frozen faces. At the moment they realized they'd spent the entire night confessing to crimes. To a federal judge. Who'd been taking notes. You're done, I said to Sterling. You know that, right? The Anderson deal alone is prosecutable. Add the bribery. Add tonight's conspiracy discussion about forging documents. Add the plan you outlined to systematically harass me. You can't prove. I can prove all of it. I held up my phone. Detailed notes. Times. Witnesses. Quotes. And I'm not the only one who heard it. I turned to Marcus, who'd been standing in the doorway for the past 10 minutes. My lawyer. Who'd arrived with recording equipment. Who'd been running a camera from the hallway. Documenting everything. How much did you get? I asked. All of it, Marcus said quietly. Every word since 11:15. Sterling's face drained of color. Tom stood up. Started for the door. Tom, I said. You might want to stay. You're going to need a lawyer too. He stopped. Turned back. Me. You admitted to defrauding your clients. On camera. With witnesses. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. I looked at Patricia. Housing discrimination, I said. That's what you were describing when you talked about controlling who gets in. That's a federal crime too. Then at the others. One by one. Each one who'd spoken tonight. Each one who'd confessed. Each one who'd forgotten that walls have ears. And sometimes those ears belong to people who care about justice. You should all get lawyers, I said. Good ones. Because I'm turning my notes over to the U.S. Attorney's Office in the morning. I picked up my coffee pot. Walked back toward the kitchen. Behind me, the room exploded in noise. Panic. Anger. Desperate attempts to take back words that couldn't be taken back. But I didn't turn around. Didn't respond. I'd heard everything I needed to hear. They'd crossed the line. And there was no uncrossing it. I found her in the service hallway. Sitting on an overturned milk crate. Book in her lap. Sarah. The girl who dropped the champagne. The girl I'd defended. She looked up when I approached. Started to stand. Don't, I said. Stay. You've earned a break. She sat back down. I leaned against the wall across from her. What are you reading? She hesitated. then turned the book so I could see the cover. LSAT prep. Logic games. I felt something catch in my chest. You're applying to law school. Trying to. She closed the book. The test is in January. I'm not. I don't think I'm ready. But I can't afford a prep course, so I'm just. She gestured helplessly at the book. Teaching yourself. Yeah. I slid down the wall. Sat on the floor across from her. Logic games were the hardest section for me too, I said. She looked up. Surprised. You took the LSAT. Long time ago. I scored a 172. Her eyes widened. That's really good. It was good enough. I nodded at her book. Where are you applying? State schools, mostly. Wherever I can get in-state tuition. She paused. This is probably stupid. I'm 20. I work 3 jobs. I barely have time to study. Everyone says I should be practical. Get a business degree or something. Who's everyone? My mom. My manager at my other job. My guidance counselor in high school. She smiled sadly. Basically anyone I ask. I knew that story. Had lived that story. What do you want? I asked. I want. She stopped. Started again. I want to do immigration law. My parents came here from Guatemala. They did everything right. But the system it's broken. And I've watched them struggle for 20 years with paperwork and lawyers who don't care and judges who. She stopped again. Looked at me. Sorry. You probably don't want to hear about this. Keep going, I said. Sarah took a breath. My dad got deported 2 years ago. The hallway felt smaller suddenly. Colder. A traffic stop. Broken taillight. The cop ran his documents. Found out he'd overstayed his visa by 6 months. 6 months from 15 years ago. An administrative error. His lawyer said it would be fine. That they'd fix it. Her voice cracked. They didn't fix it. They deported him. Sent him back to a country he left when he was 19. A country where he doesn't have family anymore. Doesn't have connections. Doesn't have anything. I'm sorry, I said. The judge. She wiped her eyes. The judge in his case didn't even look at the file. Didn't read the letters from his employer. From our church. From people who'd known him for a decade. Just. She snapped her fingers. Gone. Like he was nothing. She looked down at her LSAT book. So yeah. I want to be a lawyer. I want to be someone who actually reads the file. Who sees people. Who understands that paperwork errors shouldn't destroy families. I sat there. Silent. Understanding something I'd been too focused on Sterling to see earlier. Sarah, I said slowly. What court was your father's case in? Federal. Immigration court. Southern District. My district. Do you remember the judge's name? She pulled out her phone. Scrolled. Found something. Judge Monroe. Not me. Thank God. But I knew Monroe. Had clerked with him years ago. Good judge. Thorough. Fair. But I also knew immigration courts were overwhelmed. Underfunded. Running on impossible timelines. Was he represented? I asked. He had a lawyer. Public defender. Overworked, I said quietly. Yeah. She put her phone away. The lawyer told us afterward that he had 40 cases that month. 40. He said he'd done his best, but there wasn't time to build a real case. I understood the reality she was describing. Had seen it from the bench. The grinding machinery of a system trying to process too many people with too few resources. Good intentions. Bad outcomes. That's why I want to do this, Sarah said. Someone has to care enough to actually fight. I was about to respond when Patricia's voice echoed from the main hall. Some girl from a state school. I'd heard that earlier. Hadn't paid attention. But now, looking at Sarah, at this girl who was working 3 jobs to study for the LSAT, who wanted to be an immigration lawyer, who'd watched her father get deported because of a 6-month paperwork error from 15 years ago. Patricia's dismissal hit differently. Some girl from a state school. Like state schools produced inferior humans. Like working-class students didn't deserve opportunities. Like Sarah, brilliant, determined, exhausted Sarah, was somehow less qualified, less deserving, less worthy because her parents couldn't afford legacy donations. I stood up. "Stay here," I said. "Is everything okay?" "No." I smiled. Cold smile. "But it's about to be." I walked back into the main hall. Patricia was holding court again. Different audience. Same attitude. These diversity initiatives are destroying educational standards. "Patricia," I said. She turned. Saw me. Her face tightened. "You need to leave," she said. "You've caused enough disruption." "I heard you earlier," I interrupted, "when you were talking about that girl from a state school. The one who dropped out. The one you used as proof that some people just aren't built for excellence." Patricia's mouth opened, closed. "Tell me about her," I said. "I don't know what you're." "The girl you were dismissing. The diversity admission who made everyone uncomfortable by needing financial aid. Tell me what happened to her." Patricia looked around, looking for support. Finding none. Everyone was watching. "She couldn't keep up," Patricia said finally. "She dropped out after 1 semester. Which proved the point. She wasn't qualified." "Or," I said, "she couldn't afford it. If she couldn't afford it, she shouldn't have applied." "That's not how financial aid works." "The point is," Patricia's voice rose, "the point is that these admissions are taking spots from qualified candidates. From legacy families who've contributed to the school for generations." "Contributed," I repeated. "You mean donated. Investment in the institution. You mean buying access." Her face flushed. "I mean ensuring continuity of standards." "No." My voice was quiet. Hard. "You mean ensuring that people like Sarah, the girl working 3 jobs in your service hallway right now, never get the same opportunities your children got." "Who?" "Sarah. The girl who dropped your champagne. The girl your friend Sterling tried to get fired. She's studying for the LSAT. Working nights to afford prep materials. Teaching herself because she can't afford a course. Good for her. She's brilliant," I interrupted. "She wants to be an immigration lawyer. She wants to fight for families like hers. For people like her father, who was deported because of a 6-month paperwork error from 15 years ago." Patricia's expression didn't change. Didn't soften. "That's very sad," she said, tone suggesting it was anything but. "But the reality is that law school is competitive. Not everyone who wants to go can go. That's just how it works. That's how it works when people like you control access," I said. "I don't control. You donate. You call it legacy preference. You ensure that mediocre students from rich families get admitted over brilliant students from poor families. And then you use the ones who can't afford to stay as proof that they didn't belong." The room was silent now. Everyone listening. Everyone understanding that this wasn't just about Sterling anymore. This was about all of them. "The girl you mentioned," I said. "The one who dropped out. Did anyone ask why?" "It doesn't matter why. It matters." My voice cut through. "Did anyone ask if she needed more financial aid? If her family situation had changed? If she was working full-time while taking classes because she couldn't afford to be a full-time student?" Silence. "Did anyone ask if the legacy families who made her feel uncomfortable actually made her feel unwelcome? If the comments about her background, her clothes, her accent, her state school education made it impossible for her to focus on studying?" More silence. Or did everyone just accept the easy narrative? That she wasn't qualified. That she couldn't keep up. That the system worked exactly as it should when it filtered her out. Patricia's face had gone rigid. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. I stepped closer. I went to a state school for undergrad. I worked night shifts to pay for law school. I've been Sarah. I've been that girl you dismissed. And I'm here to tell you that the reason people like us drop out isn't because we're unqualified. Then why? Because people like you make it clear we don't belong. Because the system is designed to protect your children, not educate ours. Because standards is just a polite word for exclusion. I looked around the room. At all of them. At the comfortable, the confident, the certain. How many Sarahs have you stepped over? I asked. How many brilliant kids have you dismissed because they were working in service hallways instead of networking in social clubs? No one answered. How many opportunities have you denied to people who actually earned them, so you could give them to people who inherited them? Still silence. Sarah's father was deported, I said quietly. Removed from this country after 15 years because a judge didn't have time to read his file. Because the system was overwhelmed. Because there weren't enough resources. I looked at Patricia. You know why there aren't enough resources? Because people like you donate to elite schools to ensure your mediocre children get admitted. But you don't donate to public defender offices. You don't fund immigration courts. You don't invest in the systems that Sarah's father needed. That's not fair. You're right, I said. It's not fair. None of this is fair. But it's reality. And the reality is that this house, this party, these people, you've all built your comfort on a system that ensures people like Sarah stay in service hallways. I turned to leave. Stopped. Turned back. By the way, I said, I'm writing letters of recommendation for Sarah's law school applications. And I'm funding her LSAT prep course. And when she gets admitted, and she will get admitted, I'm making sure she has enough financial aid to actually attend. Patricia stared. You can't just. I can, I said. I'm a federal judge. My letters carry weight. My money is mine to spend. And my grandmother, the woman whose house this was, left me an inheritance specifically for this purpose. I smiled. She used to say, the system protects itself. So you have to be the exception that breaks it. I looked at Patricia. At Sterling. At all of them. I'm the exception, I said. And you're all broken. I stepped into the hallway. Pulled out my phone. 2 messages to send. The first to Marcus, my lawyer. How much of the Anderson confession did you get? Marcus. All of it. Clear audio. Multiple witnesses on camera. The second message took longer to compose. To AUSA Elizabeth Chin. Public Corruption Unit. Liz, witnessed multiple federal crimes tonight. Bribery of public officials. Bank fraud conspiracy. Housing discrimination. Civil rights violations. Have detailed notes and video evidence. Multiple subjects. Need warrant support by morning. Also, victim identified in Anderson property case. Family destroyed through coordinated corruption. They deserve justice. Call me. I hit send. Response came in 30 seconds. Jesus. Where are you? My house. The crime scene. Liz. Send me the address. Coming now. I typed the address. Then added one more message. To Senator Williams. My grandmother's oldest friend. The woman who'd mentored her. Who'd fought beside her. Who'd told me at the funeral. If you need anything. Ever. Senator. I need a witness. Federal crimes committed tonight at my grandmother's house. U.S. Attorney en route. Your presence would send a message about who this justice system actually protects. 3 minutes passed. Then, address? I sent it. Put my phone away. and walked back into the party. But I wasn't alone anymore. The cavalry was coming. 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Diana looked confused. "We're not expecting anyone else." "I am," I said. I walked to the door, opened it. Senator Margaret Williams stood on my grandmother's porch. 73 years old. Silver hair. Sharp eyes. The kind of presence that makes rooms straighten their spines. Behind her, AUSA Elizabeth Chen. 30s. Efficient. Already holding a legal pad. "Judge Vance," the senator said. Formal. Establishing my title for anyone listening. Senator Williams. "Thank you for coming." We walked inside together. The party noise died like someone had cut a wire. Everyone turning. Everyone staring. Everyone suddenly understanding that the dynamics had shifted again. Sterling was near the windows. He saw the senator. His face went pale. "Senator Williams," he said. Forced smile. Extended hand. What a surprise. The senator walked past him. Straight to me. "Where's the evidence?" she asked quietly. I handed her my phone. "Notes are time-stamped. Video is with my lawyer. Multiple witnesses to every conversation." She scrolled. Her expression didn't change, but her jaw tightened. "The Anderson case?" Fully detailed. Admission of conspiracy, bribery, fraud. 9 witnesses. "Jesus," she breathed. Sterling approached. Tried again. "Senator, I'm not sure what." "Mr. Hartwell." The senator's voice could freeze water. "I'd suggest you stop talking and call your attorney." His smile disappeared. "I don't understand. You admitted to multiple federal crimes tonight. In front of a federal judge. While being recorded." She looked at him. "You understand now?" The color drained from his face completely. Patricia stepped forward. "This is absurd." She was pretending to be staff. She was standing in her own house, the senator interrupted, listening to guests commit crimes. "That's not entrapment. That's stupidity on your part." "But she..." "Judge Vance." The senator's voice carried across the room. Formal. Establishing. "Would you like to make a statement?" I stood there, still wearing the apron, still holding a champagne tray, and felt the full weight of the moment. "Yes," I said. I untied the apron, folded it, set it on the tray. Then I looked at Sterling, at Patricia, at Tom, at every person who dismissed me tonight. "My name is Olivia Vance," I said. "I'm a federal judge for the Southern District. I was appointed 3 years ago. I've never been overturned on appeal. I have a reputation for being thorough, fair, and unmerciful to white-collar criminals who think wealth protects them from consequences." Silence. Complete silence. This house belonged to my grandmother, Judge Eleanor Vance. She left it to me. Which makes all of you guests in my home. I pulled out my phone. "Tonight, you admitted to bribery of public officials. Conspiracy to commit bank fraud. Housing discrimination. Civil rights violations. Document fraud. Systematic harassment. And multiple other federal crimes." I looked at Sterling. "You outlined a plan to force me from my property through illegal means. You admitted to destroying the Anderson family through coordinated corruption. You advocated for document fraud as business strategy." My voice stayed level. Calm. Professional. "You did all of this in front of witnesses, while being recorded, in the home of a federal judge." Sterling's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "Did you really think," I asked quietly, "that someone who cleans floors can't also understand constitutional law? That someone serving champagne can't recognize federal crimes when she hears them?" "You tricked us." "I stood here," I said. "You talked. That's not a trick. That's just you revealing who you are when you think no one important is watching. I turned to AUSA Chen. I'm providing my notes as a formal complaint. I'm willing to testify. And I'm requesting immediate investigation into the Anderson property case and any other families who've been targeted by similar schemes. Chen nodded. We'll need full statements. Tonight, if possible. Of course. Then I looked at Sarah, still standing in the hallway doorway. Eyes wide. Tears streaming. Sarah, I said. Come here. She approached slowly. This is Sarah Morales, I said to the senator. She's studying for the LSAT. She wants to be an immigration lawyer. Her father was deported 2 years ago due to a 6-month paperwork error from 15 years ago. The senator's expression softened. What court? Southern District. Judge Monroe. I know Monroe. Good man. Overworked. Yes. I put my hand on Sarah's shoulder. I'm writing her law school recommendations. And I'm funding her education. And when she graduates, I'm hiring her to clerk for me. Sarah made a sound. Half sob, half laugh. You don't have to. Yes, I do, I said. Because the system that deported your father is the same system that tried to destroy you tonight. And we break it by making sure people like you get the education, the opportunities, and the power to change it. I looked back at Sterling. At his frozen face. At his certain world crumbling. You asked who I think I am, I said. I'm the granddaughter of a woman who cleaned houses before she became a judge. I'm someone who worked night shifts to pay for law school. I'm someone who's been invisible her entire life. I smiled. And I'm someone who just watched you destroy yourself because you forgot that invisible people are still listening. Sterling found his voice. This will never hold up. My lawyers will tell you the same thing I'm about to tell you, I said. You confessed. Voluntarily. In a semi-public setting. With no expectation of privacy. No coercion. No interrogation. I was drunk. Intoxication isn't a defense to voluntary statements. You were pretending. I was existing. You made assumptions. Tom stood. We should all stop talking. Now. Good advice, AUSA Chen said. About 3 hours too late. Sterling's hands were shaking. I want my lawyer. Call them, I said. But before you do, understand something. I stepped closer. Voice quiet. Calm. No anger. Just certainty. You admitted it. In public. In front of a sitting U.S. senator. In front of a federal prosecutor. In front of 9 witnesses. While being recorded. That doesn't mean. It means exactly what it means, I interrupted. You're done. Your business is done. Your reputation is done. Everything you built on corruption and cruelty. Gone. You can't. I can't, I agreed. But the law can. And the law is remarkably efficient when there's this much evidence. Silence. Heavy. Final. The Anderson family, I said. You're going to find them. You're going to compensate them. Fully. For the property. For the emotional distress. For the years you stole. I don't have to. You do. Because if you don't, I will make it my personal mission to ensure every single crime you admitted to tonight is prosecuted to the fullest extent possible. I looked at AUSA Chen. That's within your authority, right? Victim compensation as part of a plea agreement. She smiled. Cold smile. Absolutely. Sterling's face had gone from pale to gray. You've destroyed me. No, I said quietly. You destroyed yourself. I just stood here and watched. I turned to Patricia. The girl who dropped out. Find her. Apologize. And make sure her tuition is covered if she wants to return. I will not. You will. Or I'll make sure every school board, every admissions committee, Every institution you donate to knows exactly what you said tonight about diversity admissions." Her mouth snapped shut. I looked at Tom. "The clients you defrauded. You're going to contact them, disclose the settlement amount you actually recovered, and compensate them for the difference. That's justice," I finished. "That's what happens when lawyers forget they're officers of the court." No more arguing. No more objections. Just silence. The silence of people realizing consequences exist, even for them. "You can go now," I said. "All of you. Get your lawyers. Prepare your defenses. Do whatever you need to do." They started moving toward the door. Slowly. Defeated. Sterling stopped at the threshold. Turned back. "You're cruel," he said. I smiled. "No," I said. "I'm just. There's a difference." He left. They all left. And my grandmother's house was finally empty of everyone who didn't belong there. Marcus was still in the doorway. Patricia's son. The one who'd recognized me. Who'd stayed silent. Who'd let this play out. He walked over slowly. "My mother," he said, "will face consequences." "Good." His voice was quiet. "Certain. She should." He pulled something from his pocket. A ring. Family crest. Gold. Heavy. The kind of thing that gets passed down through generations of people who mistake heritage for character. "My grandfather gave me this," he said, "when I turned 18. Said it represented our family values. Our legacy. Our responsibility to maintain standards." He looked at it. Then at me. "I don't want it anymore." He set it on the table. "I don't want to be part of a family that treats people like you were treated tonight. That treats people like Sarah like they're disposable. That thinks wealth equals worth." "Marcus. I'm changing my name," he said. "Legally. I'm done being a Hartwell. I'm done carrying that legacy." He turned toward the door. Stopped. "Thank you," he said, "for showing me who my family really is. And for showing me that character matters more than comfort." He left. Didn't look back. And I stood there in my grandmother's house, understanding that sometimes justice isn't just about prosecuting crimes. Sometimes it's about giving people permission to choose differently. 2 weeks later, I got a call. From AUSA Chin. "The Andersons," she said. "We found them. And they're getting their property back. Full restitution. Plus damages. Sterling's company is liquidating assets to cover it." I exhaled. "How are they?" "Broken. But healing." The father cried when I told him. Said he thought no one cared. "People care," I said. "They just don't always know the crimes are happening." "There's more," Chen continued. "We're investigating 6 other families. Similar patterns. Same tactics. Sterling's been doing this for years." "How many victims?" "At least 15. Maybe more. 15 families. Destroyed. Displaced. Erased. Also Sterling could profit. We're prosecuting all of it," Chen said. "Federal RICO charges. Conspiracy. Civil rights violations. He's looking at 20 years minimum." "Good. The judge on the case?" Chen paused. "She asked if you'd be willing to consult as an expert witness, given your unique insight into how this operation worked." I smiled. I'd be honored. A month later, another call. This one from Sarah. "Judge Vance." Her voice was shaking. "I got in." "Which school?" "All of them. Every single school I applied to. And," she started crying, "full scholarships. To all of them." "Sarah, that's incredible." "Your letter," she said. "The admissions officer told me. She said they've never seen a recommendation like that. That you didn't just vouch for my qualifications. You explained why the system is designed to exclude people like me, and why schools need to actively fight that exclusion. I'd written 3 pages. Single-spaced. Every word true. You earned those acceptances, I said. I just made sure they saw what I saw. I'm picking Georgetown, she said. Because it's close to DC. Because I want to work in immigration law. Because I want to be where the policy gets made. You'll be amazing. Will you? She hesitated. Will you still let me clerk for you? After I graduate? Sarah, I said. I'm counting on it. She laughed through tears. Thank you. For everything. For seeing me when everyone else looked through me. That's what judges are supposed to do, I said. See everyone. 6 months later. Early morning. I stood in my grandmother's closet. 2 items hanging side by side. The apron. Black. Starched. The one I'd worn that night. The robe. Black. Heavy. The one I wear to court. Both uniforms. Both representing power. But different kinds. The apron gave me invisibility. Made me powerless. Made me nothing. Until it didn't. Until I used that invisibility as a weapon. Until I proved that being unseen doesn't mean being unable. The robe gives me visibility. Makes me powerful. Makes me a judge. Until it doesn't. Until I remember that robes are just fabric. That titles are just words. That power without purpose is just performance. I ran my fingers across both. Felt their weight. Their meaning. And understood what my grandmother had been trying to teach me all along. Power isn't what you wear. It's what you do when people think you can't do anything. It's how you listen when people think you can't hear. It's who you protect when people think no one's watching. The apron and the robe hung there. Side by side. Same purpose. Different tools. Both reminding me. Justice doesn't care what you're wearing. It only cares whether you're paying attention. I picked up the robe. Put it on. And went to court. If you were holding that apron, would you have corrected them immediately? Or waited? Pause. If you saw someone being dismissed, would you have intervened? Or watched? Pause. If you heard power confessing its crimes, would you have walked away? Or listened? Pause. The people you pass every day. The ones serving you. The ones cleaning. The ones invisible. Pause. What are they listening to? What are they learning? What are they waiting to do? Pause. Power reveals itself when it feels safe. Justice happens when someone refuses to let it stay hidden. Pause. Who are you? The one who confesses? Or the one who remembers? Based on true stories of people who worked while they studied, who listened while they served, who became the judges, the lawyers, the changemakers, who changed the system that tried to make them invisible.